Come visit with an amazing Florentine, David Harwell, coming up next on Carolina People. Good morning. Welcome to Carolina People. This morning we're in Timminsville, South Carolina at the Fox 43 studio. We're focused on one of the PD's most recognized citizens, David Harwell. David's the former Chief Justice of the South Carolina Supreme Court and currently serves as special counsel to Nelson Mullins, Riley, and Scarborough. Chief Justice Harwell, thanks so much for being with us this morning.
I'm happy to be with you today.
Incredible opportunity to think about the lives of so many Florentines. All week we've got some amazing folks, but to think about the opportunity to highlight you, I couldn't think of anyone better. This morning as I drove up here to the Florence studio from the beach, I think I crossed over the David Walker Harwell Bridge with so many folks on either the morning or the evening or many times a day, folks who probably don't even know who that is. Hopefully we're giving folks an opportunity to see who that is.
Well, thank you.
It is the life of a Florentine that the viewers have come to recognize, the transition of how the PD area, and over time the area has changed so much since you grew up here, and then served as a legislator, served in this area as a trial judge, and later elected to the bench of the Supreme Court. The transition in the PD is most recognized when you think about how the Florence area has changed. What's your first memory of the area that really sticks out in your mind, and how has that changed over the years?
Well, you have to, I hate to go too far back because then people will find out exactly how old I am. But I was born during what so many people refer to as the Great Depression. And so this is a agricultural community that we lived in then. I grew up in the Mars Bluff community. I was born in the Mars Bluff community. My father was a farmer and a businessman. Went to the public schools, went to the elementary school out in the Mars Bluff community, went to the public schools here in Florence. Graduated from the old McClanagan High School, and it was primarily an agricultural economy then. We had really two major employers then. The Atlantic Coastline Railroad. This was a major railroad center. We had a lot of railroad shops here in Florence County, and that was probably the most sought-after employment in the PD area. Marita Bakery was probably the next largest employer here in Florence County. So, we've seen a lot of change since then. This is, again, during recovering from the Great Depression and into the World War II era that I'm speaking of.
Mm-hmm. You still have family living in the PD area, too?
Yes, I have a son, Brian, who is a lawyer here in Florence. Has his law firm here in Florence. I have a younger brother, Hicks Harwell, who is a resident circuit judge. I have another brother, Jimmy, who is a magistrate here in Florence and also a farmer. He's a farmer in the class and lives in the home place.
Mm-hmm. So a heck of a lot of relation to the law. A son, a brother, another brother, relation to the law has been throughout the family since the beginning, or is that something that you began?
I'm the first generation of lawyers. As I said, my father was a farmer, and I came back and started practicing law, taught my brother Hicks into going to law school, and then he later came back and joined me in the practice of law, and then I have two sons that are now practicing law, one at the beach and one is here in Florence. I have a niece that is in law, but she works for the Speaker of the House in Columbia. Her name is Ashley Harwell Beach. So we now have a number of lawyers in South Carolina, but I was the first one.
That's amazing. What about childhood friends from the area? Do you still get to see any friends that you grew up with here in the PD area?
I hate to say this, but, we had a 50th class reunion. Several years ago, and yes, I saw a number of them were still there. Some of them just barely hanging on, but it's always good to see old high school friends and business acquaintances, and there's still some around. Yeah.
I'm sure. Well, obviously today, the thrill of highlighting growing up in the PD, but surely wanted to shift over to your legislative career, and then later to your judicial career, and then what you're doing today. The legislative career began in 1962.
That's right.
40 years ago.
Well, that's right, 40 years ago. I didn't realize it'd been that long. Yes, well, I got out of the service in 1954, came back and went to law school and ran for the legislature and was elected in 1962. Served for 5.5 terms. I was on the Ways and Means Committee, the Judiciary Committee. I was chairman of the State Agricultural Study Committee and served on Labor Commerce. I served on just about every committee at one time or another when I was in the House of Representatives. And then in 1973, I was elected resident circuit judge of the 12th Judicial Circuit, which is composed of Florence and Marion counties.
When you served as a legislator, what area did that encompass? Was that just Florence County, or was it Florence and adjacent counties?
We didn't have the one-man, one-vote law at the time I was in the legislature. Every county had one senator, and then the members of the House of Representatives depended on the population of the county. At that time, I think we had 5 members of the House of Representatives from Florence County. And I was one of 5, but all members of the House of Representatives ran countywide. There were no districts. This was before the one-man, one-vote law came down, and we all ran countywide. And it's interesting, back when I was in the legislature, we actually ran the county. We had county commissioners here in Florence County, but we actually passed the county appropriation bill. It was called the county supply bill. Every county in the state passed their respective county supply bills in South Carolina, and took it back to your respective counties and met with the various department heads and the county commissioners as they were called in, and they sort of implemented. But the counties are really run by the legislative delegations back there.
That's amazing. You must remember a heck of a lot of instances, events during your service that through that had a big impact on the growth of the PD and some of the changes in the PD. Can you think for a minute, can you tell the viewers a little bit about maybe 3 or 4 of your more memorable experiences in the legislature that may have had an impact on the PD? Obviously, all the time having an impact on South Carolina and the Carolinas in general, but any real memorable?
Well, I think I take great pride, frankly, now in being a team player, and I don't want this to come across as this is something that David Harwell did, because there are a lot of people involved, legislative leaders as well as civic leaders that played a tremendous part in bringing about the things that I'm most proud of. One is the development of Francis Marion College, now Francis Marion University. Through the generosity of the Wallace family, who owned the property located where Francis Marion University is presently located. They donated that property. We passed a law through the General Assembly with the help of the governor and all the members of the delegation at that time, senators and House members, and established Francis Marion College, which now is a wonderful university and provides higher education for a lot of young men and young women that would not have been able to get a college education without that university having been established. So I take great pride in having played a small part in that. There's 2 civic leaders that I would like to recognize as being very instrumental in Francis Marion University and Francis Marion College, as it was known then. Dr. Howard Stokes, the late Dr. Howard Stokes. He's the father of the Stokes boys that had the Stokes Regional Eye Clinic here in Florence now. But he was a wonderful man, good friend of mine. James Rogers, who was the editor of what was known then as the Florence Morning News, was very active in promoting the establishment of Francis Marion College and the building of the university out in Mars Bluff. So that's one thing that I'm very proud of. During the 60s, when I was in the legislature, we built the Florence Darlington Technical College. That was a cooperative effort of the Florence delegation and the Darlington delegation. And some interesting stories about how that all came about. That property at one time was owned by Clemson University. Dr. Bob Edwards was the president, I think, at that time of Clemson University, and he guarded the property of Clemson University, and he was very reluctant to release that property to us. So we were meeting over the old Granby Bank building here in Florence, and the late James C. Spot Mazengo, he was in the Senate from Darlington County, a very influential senator from Darlington County, very colorful speaker and wonderful trial lawyer and everything, and he related to Spot that we were having some problems acquiring this property. So we got on the telephone and called Dr. Edwards up at Clemson, and I never will forget the conversation. I could only hear Spot, but he said, Bob, this is Spot, and we're meeting here talking about the establishment and building of our Florence Darlington Technical College that we really need to help us attract industry here in the PD area. And they exchanged pleasantries for a few minutes, and said, Bob, what is the problem with us getting this property across from the experimental station? And Bob related to him that he needed it for agricultural experimental purposes and everything. And at that time, I was chairman of the State Agricultural Study Commission, and I said, well, David Harwell is here, and he heads the Agricultural Study Committee, and he's trying to help you relocate out on what is now the Dargan property and acquire property for you out there. And we really need that property. Well, Bob was still reluctant to release that property. And so finally Scott said, well, Bob, you know I'm on the Senate Finance Committee, and you may have some problems with your budget request if we can't get this property. So long story short, we got the property, and Florence Darlington Technical Education College now is located out there and doing a wonderful job providing vocational opportunities and educational opportunities for the young people in the PD area. And that's just an interesting thing that took place, and that was a cooperative effort again by the Florence delegation that I was a part of, and the Darlington delegation, as well as business leaders from both Florence and Darlington County. So those are two things. Another thing, as I just mentioned a few minutes ago, is as chairman of the State Agricultural Study Commission, I had senators, House members, and gubernatorial appointees on that committee, and our job was to try to study and recommend things that would improve the agricultural economy for South Carolina. And one of the things was the expansion of the PD experimental stations here in Florence. They needed additional property with different kinds of soil, and so I was instrumental in acquiring the property from the Dargan family between here and Florence, and the relocation of the Florence Darlington PD experimental station. I'm very proud of my role in that. And of course, back then we all played a major role in the industrial development of the PD area, providing jobs. As I mentioned earlier, when I grew up, this was an agricultural economy, with the exception of the railroad. And today you know of the industry here in Florence County, and the thing that was most helpful to us was the intersection of I-95 and I-20, and having this as a major railroad center and transportation center with a good airport that was a result of World War II. We had a Air Force fighter base here during World War II, and that's how our airport got built. And so with all of those things, and with the help of a lot of leaders in the PD area, we began to grow industrially, and now we are the major industrial area of the PD part of the state of South Carolina.
Absolutely. Chief Justice Harwell, there's so many questions I want to ask you. I was wondering if we could take a quick break and then come back to segue into your judicial career.
Be happy to.
Great. Stay tuned for more Carolina People coming up next. Welcome back to Carolina People. This morning we're visiting with the former Chief Justice of the South Carolina Supreme Court, David Harwell. David, thanks again for being with us this morning.
I'm happy to be with you.
We were highlighting much of your life growing up in the PD and living in the PD, of your legislative career, and I think that segues very well into your service, your initial judicial service. Can we talk real quick about that? In 1973, you were elected or selected to serve as a trial judge here?
I was unopposed, but I was elected by a joint session of the House and the Senate as the resident circuit judge for the 12th Judicial Circuit. In South Carolina, we have 16 judicial circuits. We only had 16 circuit judges, and I was elected upon the death of the late Judge Badger Baker to succeed him in 1973.
And in that instance, you served that covered primarily Florence and Marion counties?
Florence and Marion counties. That was the 12th Judicial Circuit. And I held court as a resident judge in those two counties. But circuit judges in South Carolina rotate all over South Carolina. So I held court in every county in the state during the time that I was a circuit judge.
Mm-hmm. What kind of cases would you hear? What's an example? And did you get in any domestic cases? That's a question oftentimes the viewers ask. Do they handle domestic cases? What were family courts like back then?
We had no family courts back then. Yes, I heard domestic matters then. In some counties, larger counties, Florence was one of them, we had a county judge, Judge Bill McGowan, who had limited jurisdiction and heard some kinds of family court matters. Marion County had no family court judge or no county court judge. So on Saturday mornings, I would go to Marion County and hear domestic matters over there. But a lot of things that are now in family court were heard in circuit court, done by circuit court judges. There's a tremendous difference now between what was the judicial system in 1973 and the judicial system now. To give you an example, I was one of 16 circuit judges. There were no family court judges in South Carolina. There was no appellate court system, intermediate appellate court system in South Carolina, and there was just 5 members of the South Carolina Supreme Court. The total South Carolina judiciary at that time, state judiciary, was 16 circuit judges, 5 members of the Supreme Court. Today we have a statewide family court system with 52 family court judges, 46 circuit court judges, 9 members of the Court of Appeals that sit in panels of 3, and we still have 5 members on the Supreme Court, with the Chief Justice being the administrative head of the entire judicial branch of government. Mm-hmm. When I was a circuit judge, and really after I got on the Supreme Court, the legislature, by legislative act, set the terms of court, adopted the court rules that we ran the court system by. The Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, when I became a circuit judge, was just that, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. He wrote opinions just like the other members, but he didn't have any administrative responsibilities over the entire judicial system. Today, the Supreme Court, they promulgate and adopt the rules that operate the court system. The Chief Justice is the head of the system. He has a staff, court administration. He literally runs the judicial system for the state of South Carolina. There's a big difference
Wow.
now from what it was when I became a judge in 73.
And you have covered all those bases, both as a circuit judge, later as a justice in 1980, you were elected as a justice, and then in 91 became the Chief Justice of the State Supreme Court. At what year did many of those administrative duties become turned over to the Chief Justice?
Well, that was a tremendous challenge. The rulemaking authority was taken over by the Supreme Court in the 80s. Chief Justice Lewis was the Chief Justice and all of that was taking place, and there were many. I was involved in all of it, but a lot of leadership in the legislature as well as in the citizenry of this state helped us bring about this much needed change.
Absolutely. That must have been a heck of a lot as you think about that, and some of the changes that have happened in the legal profession over your years. You got your legal degree in the late 50s, not to date you again. 45 years later, a lot of changes have happened in the legal profession here in South Carolina and throughout the country. A couple of the primary changes you've recognized over the last 45 years since you got your law license.
Well, the tremendous growth of the legal profession is one major development in the field of law. The development of specialties. When I started practicing law, particularly in rural areas like Florence was at that time, we were all pretty much general practitioners. I mean, we did a little bit of everything. But now there's so many large law firms, and there's such a need now for specialties that a person cannot stay current in every field of the law as we could 45 years ago. To give an example, the law firm that I'm special counsel with now, Nelson Mullins Law Firm, we have 275 lawyers. You know, we have offices in Munich, Germany, Atlanta, Georgia, Charlotte, North Carolina, Columbia, Greenville, Charleston, Myrtle Beach. You know, we're the largest law firm in South Carolina, but we have so many specialties. You know, we have employment law specialties, we have litigation specialties, we have tax law specialties, we have transactional law specialties, we have bankruptcy specialties. You know, all these people make up an all-service, I guess, law firm. Now, there's still a lot of lawyers that still do the general practice, particularly in the more rural communities, you know. So that's one big thing. Another big change is when I was in law school, we had two girls in law school. One later became a D.C. Court of Appeals judge. She's now deceased, a friend of mine, late Judge Gene Galloway, and the other girl was Gina Gaston, who finished law school and never practiced. She was from Chester. Today, you know, I think half of the student body at the law school are female, and more girls are getting into the legal profession, and they're really becoming very active. I think the president of the South Carolina Bar was a female last year. So, you know, it's become a profession that has opened its arms to a lot of girls, a lot of minorities, and it's a much more diversified profession now than it was when I started practicing law.
Absolutely. You know, I love talking about women of the law, as my grandmother got her law license in 1920 and practiced for 71 years. So I have a great love of that, and we're going to have to get you back another time to talk about that. We've got a couple of minutes, and I wanted to talk about some of the congestion and delay in the court system, which has helped prompt what you're now so focused on for Nelson Mullins as an arbitrator, mediator, alternative dispute resolution. Those are big words. We hear them. What exactly is alternative dispute resolution, if you can break it down real quick? And I almost hesitate to ask because we've got to get you back on another time. This is so exciting.
I do a lot of it. I do 2 or 3 mediations a week as a general rule, and I do them in primarily the higher profile cases, the more complicated cases. But mediation is basically where I sit down with both parties to the dispute and with their lawyers, talk to them, try to help them find a way to settle that dispute and take it out of the court system. Arbitration is where I, as an arbitrator, hear the facts, read the brief, and just arbitrarily make the decision that I think could be made by applying the law to the facts as I think they are in that particular case. Those are the two primary methods that we are using today to try to get cases out of the court system, help people resolve their disputes without getting it into a public court system, and allowing the judiciary to devote their time to, or more of their time, I should say, to dealing with the criminal element and trying to make society safer for our citizens.
Chief Justice David Harwell retired in 1994. The retirement hasn't slowed him down. Born and raised in Florence, lived much of his life in Columbia representing the citizens of Florence. Served back here in early point in the judiciary and then later as a justice and then Chief Justice of the South Carolina Supreme Court. Now he's down to the beach, but is traveling all over the state. David Harwell, you honor us for being on this morning. We hope we can get you back another time to cover so much more of these incredible questions and answers that we're really looking forward to highlighting.
I enjoyed talking to you, and as you just mentioned, we just sort of touched some of the highlights. We don't want to go into a whole lot of detail about everything.
He's a man that's open to any scrutiny. Chief Justice David Harwell, catch him at the beach or anywhere throughout the state. Thanks again for being on this morning.
Thank you.
Stay tuned to more Carolina People coming up next. We want to thank Chief Justice Harwell for making this episode of Carolina People such a great success.